One-handed shooting is very important for us to train in the competition and in the real-life context. In competition, they will throw it in at random points and you will ruin your entire match if you haven't trained it. In the real-life context, it can legitimately be life or death. In that context, there's a high enough likelihood that the first 1 or 2 rounds out of your firearm will be fired with one hand on the grip. And that could be as a result of anything from an injured limb to actually having to physically defend yourself to even get to your firearm. From the military or law enforcement side, this risk of shooting one-handed actually increases over a defensive shooting in the civilian world. So with all that said, we want to ensure that we're training our one-handed skills enough that we're competent to do all of our weapon manipulations, and if we can try to get to about 50 to 75% of the speed and accuracy of our two-handed shooting, that will hopefully put us in a spot where we're able to competently do what's asked of us if it's ever required. So first, our strong hand is the hand that we have chosen as our firing hand, which if I'm a right-handed shooter, my strong hand will be my right hand, and obviously my weak hand will be my left hand. There's a common saying that you shouldn't have a weak hand when it comes to shooting, and in theory that's awesome, and I wish that was the case, but in reality it would be very, very difficult for us to get to 100% equal skill in our strong and weak hand. There's likely more important things to train than fretting about obtaining perfect 100% equality between my right and left hand. Starting with the two-hand grip, if I remove my support hand and I'm left with this empty puzzle piece here, the energy of the firearm is going to want to recoil into that, which looks like this. One way to compensate for this missing puzzle piece is to apply a little bit more pressure on our forefingers towards the back of our wrist, like so. Because remember, we're missing that puzzle piece, that support hand that counteracts the grip pressure of our right hand. What I also like to do is apply a little bit more outward pressure with my thumb, and I place it on top of the slide lock lever as a little bit of a ledge to pinch my fingers together like so, and also apply downward pressure with my thumb. On my support hand side, because I don't have an ambidextrous lever, I try to just push my thumb into the ledge of the lower receiver, like so. With one-handed shooting, I find that this type of tension between the thumb and hand gives me a little bit more pressure and control on the gun to counteract my trigger press and maintain my sight picture. Another option that's worked for me is taking my thumb and pointing it down and then applying pressure inwards, like so. If your fingers are long enough, you can marry them up together for a good index point and then apply that same torsion outwards. Another thing that people like to do is to take their thumb and push it up towards the slide, pushing outwards on the slide. And rotating the gun into my grip and then applying my trigger pressure. This can be a very stable shooting platform if you only need to deliver one round. Remember, the slide is going to be moving, so if I keep pressure on the slide, I'm going to lose that pressure on it as it moves. The other issue that is possible to run into with a high thumb grip is you could impede the rearward motion of the slide enough to cause a malfunction on your firearm. This is more so an issue if you have any notched portion of the slide or optic that you're indexing on. For instance, if this slide tries to come rearward right now, my thumb is stopping it because it's sitting on the screw of the optic. Again, at the end of the day, all we're trying to do is get a good trigger press on our firearm without disturbing that sight picture. An added benefit of good grip pressure is to control the recoil for good follow-up shots. So play around with the different thumb positions, whether that's low or middle on the slide release lever or up. Now remember, the slide release lever, if we keep pressure on this, it's not going to lock back on the last round. If we find ourselves in a one-handed shooting scenario, it is likely more important in that context to land accurate rounds on target than to worry about our gun locking back on empty. In other words, in most contexts of one-handed shooting, I would likely want to put all my skill points into my accuracy attribute as opposed to ensuring that my slide lock lever works as designed. One thing you'll see when you're shooting one-handed is that your arm wants to curl inwards to align your wrist with your shoulder, because when I'm shooting two-handed, I'm applying that pressure, and when I release my support hand, it wants to go to that position. Some people do like to straighten out their firearm, one because this assists with your sight picture and ensuring that your holds remain the same. The other argument is that this keeps the recoil more in a straight back and forth manner as opposed to out and up. Now how this works, you can see from our two-handed shooting position, when we're applying that torque with our elbows, when we release our support hand, our firearm moves to this position. Now we still have torque being applied from our shoulder and our forearm, but what we can do is just twist the wrist alone, and that creates a little bit of counter pressure between the wrist and the shoulder, which attempts to keep the firearm more on a straight path. Allegedly. Try it out yourself, see if it works for you. The biggest thing we want and are looking for in our recoil control, regardless of where the firearm is positioned, is repeatability. If the recoil impulse is consistent, that means we can predict it, whether it's coming up and down like this, or out and up like this. As long as it returns in a repeatable manner, life is good. Where this becomes an issue, even with a two-handed grip, is when our recoil starts becoming unpredictable. If our hands are allowing the firearm to move in an unpredictable and unrepeatable recoil path, it makes it hard for us to land our follow-up shots on target because we don't know where the gun's going to land next. To transition to our weaker support hand, there's a couple different options. The first option I'm going to show you provides a little bit more security on your firearm during the transition. All we're doing is we're taking our thumb from this high grip here and we're moving it down as low as comfortable. So I've created a big gap here underneath the tang of the firearm, and all I'm going to do is take my support hand and drive up over top of my other wrist, enveloping that gap and releasing the grip of the firearm with my other hand as I grab with my support hand. Same thing, dropping my thumb as low as comfortable, sliding over top of my strong hand and grabbing with my weak hand. Transitioning back is the same thing. Thumb goes down as low as comfortable, slide my strong hand over my weak hand and grab the grip. When I'm doing this quickly and urgently, I place my thumb as low as possible on the firearm. I still have a good grip on it, I'm not going to drop it, but it gives me a ton of space for my support hand to move in quickly and grab the firearm. The other option is to take your thumb and place it on the other side of the firearm. Now this is not as secure as the other option, but it does provide quite a bit of space for your hand to come in and grab. Thumb to the other side of the firearm, support hand comes in and grabs. You can notice at the last second there, once I've moved the thumb over, I'm rotating the grip out a little bit so that I have a little bit extra space to grab. Thumb out, rotate, grab. Thumb out, rotate, grab. How I'm assisting with that little bit of rotation is that once my thumb is on the other side of the firearm, I'm using it to push the slide away from me and into my other hand. Just play around with both these options until you've figured out what's comfortable for you, and then train that method until it's safe and efficient and you can competently do it when demanded. Now once we transition to our weak hand, all the principles still apply that we used with our strong hand. We're just likely going to need to spend a little bit more time with our weak hand to get to a skilled level. One thing you'll likely notice with either hand is that when you're starting out, your shots are going to tend to end up on the inside of your grip. So if I press the trigger here, you can watch the reticle, it's going to move down to the right. And that's because, again, I have nothing pushing back to counteract my trigger press. I need to apply more grip pressure and more grip pressure with my thumb to ensure that my gun's not going to push down into my trigger. And again, that's because we're missing the puzzle piece of our support hand, which greatly helps us in reducing the inadequacies of our trigger press and keeps our rounds from getting pushed or pulled off target. Oh, yeah. That's embarrassing. 3.93 plus 2. That's why it's very important that the muscles that we do have on this side of the firearm are putting in some work to counteract that trigger press so our sights don't continually get pushed off target. Remember, how quickly and precisely we have to pull this trigger is entirely dictated by the situation that we're shooting in. Try to get your precision trigger presses as well as your quick trigger presses in on one-handed shooting as well, so you can figure out how to counteract those forces on the quick trigger presses with your grip.